Thank you, everyone. It's great to be back. This is my second time that I've been invited to speak at the Rotary Club. The first time was back in 2014 when I first got here to tell you guys all about the intellectual property portfolio of the university. Ultimately, Greg did not tell me that I could invite my mascot. So somehow he was one-sided in that competition here. Otherwise, we would have had the Golden Band, and we would have had Mike the Tiger, and we would have had the cheerleaders. We would have brought out the whole crew. But Greg forgot to tell us that we could do that. So there's your ribbing for today. As Cynthia said, I'm Andy Maas, and my background has brought me throughout the world, training and educating and working with universities to grow ecosystems around technologies that come out of the university research. I moved here 10 years ago from the University of Akron, where I received my law degree. Before that, I was in Dallas, where I was working at a startup engineering company, and prior to that, I was at the University of Texas, where I did my master's degree, and my undergrad was at BYU, prior to UT Austin. I couldn't have done this without the support of my wife, who was introduced as one of our guests here, Lindsay Maas. So she's my better half, and she helps make everything tick so that I can do the other things like work. I would also be remiss that many of you knew our executive director of the Innovation Park, Charlie D'Agostino. When we consolidated in 2021, that was in part because of Charlie's departure and retirement, and his recent passing. I just want to recognize him for all the great things and the pathways that he's set in motion in Baton Rouge. We do have actually one of our tenants here from Innovation Park. We have Inventherm from they are developing Creme Joy, the soft serve ice cream machine that will never break. All right. So if you have questions about that, talk to our friends back there with Creme Joy. All right. Where's our clicker? So we're going to talk about the future use of energy in Louisiana and how we got to this point. This is, as Cynthia Peterson said, the largest grant ever given out from the National Science Foundation. And to start, I'd like to introduce our first hire. Mike Mazzola is our executive director that was hired just over a month ago. He hit the ground running. He came to us from Charlotte, North Carolina, where he said, I was running an engine there, an NSF-funded initiative, but this engine looks more fun and better funded, so I want to be there. So Mike, it's great to have you here. Just this past week, we made an offer to our director for workforce development. So we're going to talk about all these things throughout the presentation today. Lacey McManus, her maiden name is Stroshine, so many of you might know her father, who was a historic Rotarian here in the Baton Rouge area. We are in the process of hiring 3 additional positions: a director of use-inspired R&D, a director of technology commercialization, and a director of community engagement. That all matters because I'm going to tell you about what this big initiative is and why we need the personnel on the ground in Louisiana to help support these programs. When I got here in 2014, a lot of my professional colleagues said, why are you moving to Louisiana? And I said to them, Louisiana has a lot of opportunity. What people don't realize is that the opportunity in Louisiana is so high, we just need to execute on it. And so I put up the word hope here for you. What does hope mean? To want something to happen or to be true and usually have a good reason to think that it might. I've spent 10 years here, and in 9 of those 10 years, I kept hearing, oh, well, we hope this comes to pass. We hope these things come to pass. And I said, you know what, I'm sick of hoping. I'm going to just go out and do. And that brings me to this guy. And I need to bring some science back into this because I was introduced by the Dean of Science at LSU. This is Dr. Kurt Richter. Dr. Kurt Richter performed an experiment back in the 50s. If he tried to do that experiment now, he would be disbarred, he would be put in jail. He essentially took domesticated rats, and he put domesticated rats in a bucket, and he let them swim, And they would swim and 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 swim, and they would swim for 5 hours before they died. He then took wild rats, and he put the wild rats in the same bucket. And those wild rats would swim for 16 minutes and then die. He then went and found some more wild rats, and he put them in the same bucket. And they would swim for 16 minutes, but at 15 minutes and 30 seconds, he would scoop them out, he would dry them off, he would give them food, he would give them water, and then the next day, he'd put them back in that bucket of water. Those wild rats would swim for 60 hours before they gave up and drowned. And his research was the very basis of what we understand as hope in our mental and psychic world. And so when I started working on fuel, which was not named fuel when we started on it, but when I started working on this initiative, it was because I had that hope that we could do something better for the state of Louisiana. So now I'm going to tell you all about it. We had and brought together over 125 individuals in the planning process, over 65 organizations. We brought together pretty much every university in our state, every community college. There's a few that aren't up there because they didn't respond to our emails, but they're invited to participate. Right? We're not going to be exclusive in any way, shape, or form on this initiative because it's so important for our state when we're talking about energy transition and the energy transition initiative for workforce, for research, and for technology development in Louisiana. Like I said, this has taken a long time. Started in 2022, worked all the way through January 2014. In 2023, I got an email. I was actually working for NSF doing a review on one of their other programs. I finished my review and I closed my laptop and I pulled up my phone and checked my email, and I got an email from the National Science Foundation that said, your proposal, is being recommended for funding for $160 million. I went out in the hall and I called my wife, and we joke about it because I couldn't get the words out to tell her what was going on. I was in Philadelphia and she said, "Are you okay?" And I said, like, "Are you in a trunk?" I'm like, "No, I'm not in a trunk." Right? "Are you at the hospital?" "No, I'm not at the hospital." The only thing I could get out of my mouth was, "We got the grant." Because we had been working on this for 2 years about bringing this to Louisiana. The next person I called was my boss, Robert Twilley, so she always gets that first notification. She jokingly said to me, "You weren't this emotional when we had our children." And I said, "I didn't work anywhere near as hard." So, it's a good thing to be able to laugh at yourself, right? So here's a quick summary video that we put together when this was announced. So I want to share this with you.
We have an opportunity now, as a collective body, to ensure that new energy and traditional energy are foundational in our economy, and that we will be able to compete not just in the U.S., but across the world in the energy domain.
Through this funding opportunity for the National Science Foundation, we will continue to develop the technologies and the talent to lead the future energy needs of this nation, while doing that providing jobs and opportunities for people in our communities. LSU is one of the few land-grant universities located right in the middle of the lower Mississippi River Delta in an energy corridor between Baton Rouge and New Orleans that has for a long history served the nation. This positioned us as a university with our partner universities and our private and non-for-profit partnerships to continue to be the leaders of the nation in energy development, talent, and technologies.
This was a collective endeavor by industry, community colleges, universities, economic development organizations, and everybody came together with one mission and one initiative, aligned for the state of Louisiana, while adding jobs in the state, while adding research capabilities in the state, and while adding technology advancements here in the state to benefit the state of Louisiana.
So in there, we talk about the fact that this is important for our state. And everybody came together and was aligned in that initiative. When we presented this to then Governor Edwards said to me, I've never seen the universities all align so quickly. I've never seen the economic development organizations in the state align so quickly. I've never seen the state Department of Energy and Natural Resources align so quickly on something that they all are getting behind. Usually there's some political component, and there was no politics in this. It was, we need to do this for the state of Louisiana. And as this crosses political boundaries, we were announced in January of 2024 after we had a change in our government in our state. And when I met with Governor Landry, we had the conversation about it, and he said, I'm behind this. I am 100% behind the carbon capture, utilization, and sequestration initiatives in our state. That's something we need to focus on in our state. This right here is a map. This is a map not made by me. This was made by the Department of Energy. This map shows what they anticipate CO2 pipelines and capacities to look like by 2050. You can see they all converge on the state of Louisiana. Why do they converge on the state of Louisiana? Because we have some amazing geology that allows for CO2 storage in the state of Louisiana. Now, a lot of people say, not in my backyard. I don't want that stored in my backyard. Well, that's why this is a funding initiative by the National Science Foundation. We're going to analyze and determine that the science says this is safe. This is something that we can do, and we can do for our state. We look at our economy and we say, there's no reason in the world why the state of Louisiana should not be the richest state in our nation, because over 25% of our energy capacity in our state comes in, or in our country comes in through the state of Louisiana. We're connected to over 60% of the refining capacity in our country. We talk about different forms of energy. We talk about electrons. So again, back to your basic chemistry. Electrons come from power. You have a wind turbine, it creates electrons. You have a solar panel, it creates electrons. Then you have other types of energy that come from molecules, right? So that's the carbon chain, the methanes, the ethanes, the things you hear about up and down the river that are producing energy for our country and producing other materials. They also can produce electrons that get pumped into our grid, but the majority of that power is coming through Louisiana when it comes through in the molecular form of energy. So here's an overlay of our state. Here's our subsurface geology. This is just the fact that we have interesting geology. There's nothing different about our land than somebody else's land, other than the fact that we have some capacity to store gases underground. That's how we ended up getting the gases out from underground. This is our pipeline network. If you've ever looked at the pipeline network across our country, it's very vast and sparse outside of the deep south. When it gets into the Louisiana-Houston area, if you're looking at a nationwide map, you can't differentiate individual pipelines. Where in West Texas, you can differentiate individual pipelines. So why is this important? This is important because we have a transportation network for gases and liquids that nobody else in the world has. So when we say we're going to be the testing ground to determine if this actually is viable, that's one of the reasons. We often hear about this as well. We produce lots of CO2. These are the CO2 emission sources, and they follow up and down the river. CO2, again, I'm going to go back to sort of basic chemistry, is carbons and oxygens. And if energy is carbons and hydrogens, and we can get enough low-cost energy to break the C from the O2, and bind it back with an H, we can make energy. And we release oxygen, right? That's the basic science here. Now, there's a lot of hurdles we have to get through to make that efficient, to make that viable, to make that economic, all of those things, all right? But that's the point of why we're doing this and why the National Science Foundation says we want to invest in this in Louisiana. Here's just some statistics that come from our state. Currently, we have over 250,000 employees that are energy or energy adjacent. We have over 50,000 miles of pipeline. We are the #2 value of U.S. chemical exports by state. We are the #1 geologic storage capacity in our country. When I showed you that map of the country and there were the green areas, those green areas were subsurface geologic capacity storage, for storage. The Louisiana, Houston, Mobile area can hold more CO2 per year than all of the other subsurface areas in our country combined, which is why that map shows these pipelines converging in Louisiana. You've heard about them. We have over $50 billion of announced projects in Louisiana. Some ways you cut it, it might be $60 billion. We are this needs to be updated. We're the 3rd state that has received EPA Class 6 primacy. That's for CO2 injection and permanent storage. Unfortunately, we are one of the highest poverty rate states in the country. We're ranked 50th in health outcomes. We're top in income inequality. And we're one of the lowest states in investment from outside to help develop our economy. We have to do this for our state. It's not an option. What does FEEL include? FEEL includes use-inspired R&D, which is going to be research that's sourced by industry. Industry will come to the table and say, I have a problem. The problem is X, Y, and Z. Now, typically, these big companies have their research facilities in other states. We're going to say that research has to be done here in the state of Louisiana. But we're going to fund that research to try to solve those problems. We also have a workforce component. There's a huge demand for upskilling and reskilling of adult workers. We also have to help change the stigma that a job at a facility on the river is a very good paying job. And we need those workers to stay in the state of Louisiana. We talk about future-proofing that workforce. We talk about ensuring that those jobs don't go somewhere else because some other facility or some other location or geography is going to give us better tax breaks, better incentives. When you look at the growth needs, and this was a report done by Governor Edwards' cabinet around energy needs and energy transition in the state, they anticipated that in the next 20 years, we're going to have to be able to fill 250,000 more jobs in the state of Louisiana in energy and energy-adjacent spaces. Yet we have a declining population. So if we don't fix this, it's the 6th graders right now that we need to get a hold of so that in 10 years they're in a position that they want to stay in Louisiana. So part of our workforce initiatives has a heavy K-12 component. If we don't fix it, people will come into our state, they will get their paycheck, and then they will leave every 2 weeks, and they will go home, and they will come back, and they will go home. Well, has an economic impact, doesn't have the same type of impact of permanent resident jobs in our state that are high-paying and high skill. And then the 3rd component is technology commercialization. What does that mean? That talks about taking these technologies that are developed by the research enterprise and moving them into the marketplace. This is through an incubation process. This is through startup competitions. This is through becoming the place that people say we need to be if we're in the energy transition space. When I talk to my friends and my colleagues that are in technology commercialization and startups, and I say to them, if you had a medical device technology, where would you want to be? And without hesitation, they say Boston or San Diego. Because those ecosystems are developed and are supportive of that activity. In 10 years, my goal with this initiative and with this team we're building is that in 10 years, when people say, I have a green tech startup, where should I be? The first thing out of somebody's mouth should be, you need to be in Louisiana. Because that's where the activity is going on. That's where you're going to grow. That's where you're going to develop. We do have 6 technical areas that we're focusing on. This was something we had to provide to the NSF as we were putting the proposal together. Carbon capture, utilization, and sequestration. And the key here, a lot of people think that that is just injecting CO2 underground. That actually is the last step when you're using carbon or CO2 for things in our economy. Sustainable hydrogen. We are very close with our friends down at GNO Inc., who led an initiative called H to the Future about building a hydrogen economy in the state of Louisiana. Energy efficiency and CO2 as a feedstock. I just made the chemical analysis of how you use CO2 as a feedstock. Sustainable water management. We have billions of gallons of fresh water flowing down right next to us. One of the reasons that all these facilities are on the river is because they have a transportation network upriver to 32 states. The second behind that is that they have unlimited cooling capacity to cool their functions with fresh water. Excuse me, you can't do that with salt water. It has to be fresh water. So you're either desalinating water at the coasts or you're doing it on the Mississippi. And then we have trillions of dollars of built infrastructure in the ground, up and down the river. We've all heard the numbers, 212 or 218 petrochemical facilities between the mouth of the Mississippi and Baton Rouge. When I was in Ohio, they had been decimated by the auto downturn. They were left with warehouses. Warehouses can get repurposed. Warehouses can get repurposed into lofts, into Amazon distribution facilities, into all sorts of other things. A petrochemical plant can't get repurposed. So it's gotta be a petrochemical plant. And taking it out of the ground costs more than putting it in the ground. So it's one of those things that we have it, we need to use it. And then finally, economic and policy research. We need to know the economics behind CO2. We need to know the policies behind CO2 that are going to put Louisiana back on the map as a leader in energy research, energy transition, and economic growth. If we get the economics wrong, we're going to be in the same cycle we've been in since the 70s, not getting our fair share of the revenues that come into our country from the assets that we are given. These are some of the programs that we're running. I'm not going to talk about those, but you can look them up. They're on our website. And while we have Nichols here, you know, and as Cynthia said, we build teams that win. This is the first time in my career that I've had the full breadth of the communications team at LSU or at a university behind me in these initiatives. So here's a little hype video they made for us. So with that, it looks like we have about 5 minutes for questions. I'm told you guys end right at 1 o'clock, so I want to make sure that I get you guys out of here on time. Any questions from the audience? Yeah.
What is the future of natural gas?
Oh. But the question is, what is the future of natural gas? I think when we talk about energy and energy transition, we need to use an all of the above strategy. You've probably heard this on the news. You've probably heard this from others in the community, that we need low-cost energy. And that low-cost energy can come in the form of solar. It can come in the form of wind. It can come in the form of nuclear. It can come in the form of natural gas. Natural gas, again, is carbons and hydrogens. The first three I mentioned are all about electrons, but Natural gas is all about molecules, which can be turned into heat. It can be turned into other sources of energy to turn a turbine to make electricity that then has now converted it into electrons. It's going to be a necessary component to the entire process. Yeah.
Andy, thank you for being here. My question deals specifically with how you guys are incentivizing startups or fledgling businesses to get involved with your organization or to relocate to Louisiana, knowing that they do have not just money behind them, but the support of an ecosystem behind them.
Yeah, absolutely. So I would be remiss without saying, if I didn't say this, and I didn't, it's not in the slide deck here because this is really focused on the National Science Foundation project. Louisiana Economic Development has pledged an additional $67.5 million to this initiative. And that's really around hiring and growing our technical capabilities at the universities. So that's one component that our state is involved in. The second component here is we're running proof of concept programs that are not just for universities but also for startups. Those proof of concept programs are non-dilutive funding mechanisms to attract and retain companies in the energy space here to Louisiana. We are also working with some friends at DOE, and the DOE, the Department of Energy, is helping us recruit companies from all over the globe to bring them to Louisiana. When we bring somebody to Louisiana, and you've probably seen this with family, friends, or colleagues, they come to Louisiana and they're like, I never knew. This is amazing. I didn't know what was going on in Louisiana. And so part of it is getting the people on the ground, in the facilities so they can see our capacities and capabilities. I have talked quite a bit about LSU being the leader on this, but this is not just an LSU initiative. This is a statewide initiative, right? Nichols is at the table. Right? We have ULL at the table, Louisiana Tech's at the table, Tulane's at the table, Dillard's at the table. They all have different strengths that we can then leverage to attract and encourage companies to be here. We got one over here.
Hi, yes.
That's not on.
Is Fuel able to partner with other local organizations, nonprofits, and/or foundations to provide funding for workforce development training programs that perhaps have been here for years and maybe struggle with funding and that kind of thing to broaden the message, to get out there for workforce and careers, et cetera?
Absolutely. So when we get fully staffed, we will have a person, Lacey McManus, who you will be able to reach out to and have a conversation with. We are looking to embrace and encourage workforce development in any way, shape, or form. That comes in different ways. Obviously, we have workforce development that occurs at our community colleges. We have workforce development that occurs at nonprofits and local community organizations. We have workforce development that happens at LSU, right? Like what's our final product? We are educating students to be good employees. And so it's the whole spectrum, and yes, we are interested and want to partner and engage in that space. I think we have time for one more.
Yeah, you mentioned the sixth graders that we're depending on to really be the skilled labor. Is that a component of this, or is it just going to help you get other grants to do that? Are you working on that one?
So we have funding dedicated for the K through 12 initiatives to have that outreach for STEM education at the K through 12 level. There's STEM education currently occurring through the Department of Education. There's also STEM education that occurs through the Board of Regents through the STEM initiative that is funded by the Board of Regents. Those organizations were at the table when we were planning this, and they said we absolutely need to be engaged at that K through 12 level so that those kids, those people that are graduating in 10 years have a perspective that they can move into this as part of a career path, a very well-paid career path for that. So, and if we get more money along the way, we're going to get more money along the way because we need more, right? You saw $50 billion of announced projects. We have 160 million, right? Like we have a drop in the bucket. So absolutely, we're going to need to get more funding to help this thing thrive and grow. Wonderful. Thank you, everybody.